Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wordsmith Theater. My name is Michelle. I'm the president of the board here, and I would like to welcome you to another episode of our pandemic playtime. And of course, we hope that you guys are staying safe out there. Tonight, we will have a discussion on Seven Guitars by August Wilson. And to help us out, we have Denise O'Neill and James West. They recently closed a production of Seven Guitars at the Pearl Theater before the coronavirus hit, so we're really happy and lucky to have them here. Denise O'Neill is the artistic director for Fade to Black here in Houston, and James West is a local actor who's been acting for many years. And so, we're happy to have you guys here. I'm going to let them take it away. Just remember our next playtime will be June 1st with Jennifer Decker, who is the artistic director for Mildred's Umbrella, who will be doing The Moors by Jane Silverman. So without further ado, Denise and James, have at it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm joined today with James West, a wonderful, awesome actor who played the part of Hedley in Seven Guitars a few months ago. And tonight we're just going to chat and talk about, what makes this particular play work, what makes it stand out, what made it rise to the top. It was chosen by the theater because it had mass appeal. And so, hopefully tonight we will talk about the beauty of the play and what colored the play and made it so wonderful. For those of you that don't know, Seven Guitars is part of an anthology of plays that was written by August Wilson. It was written, completed in 1995, but it talked about a period in 1948 where there were 7 African American friends who lived in Pittsburgh, and it just talked about the journey that one man was on. He was a blues singer, so this play is about blues, and it's about community, and it's about dreams deferred. And Seven Guitars is the way it was written. It adequately puts you into that place and time and doesn't really let you go. It's very real. The writing is very true. The dialogue and dialect is really one that you would see set in that particular time. So the job of the director is to try to take those words and make them beautiful, or make them more of an expression of what the playwright had in mind. You do that by really great acting, music, lights and sound, and all of that. But at the base of it was his writing and the way that he was able to spin the words, the way that he was able to put together monologues that were poetic in nature, but fit into what he was trying to say to the audience. So I'm going to bring James in because James loves August Wilson and he loves this play. It was an honor for me to direct it, but it was wonderful for me to be able to work with actors that were serious about the role and about the play. And so I could not have done it without him. But tonight you'll get a perspective from my point. I'll be talking to maybe playwrights and what could have worked, that maybe be something that you could take forward in your writing. And then James will give you the perspective of an actor who actually had to flow through that. So James, what was your takeaway?
Initially I'll say that some idiot didn't want to do a certain part, and the director was intelligent enough, enlightened enough to kind of give me to make me an offer I couldn't refuse, which was to do the part. So I've done a number of August Wilson plays, and I don't want to, everybody knows August Wilson kind of, but I think in terms of what makes a play work for me as an actor, it starts with an understanding of what it is you're trying to say, what story you're trying to tell. And August Wilson, as Denise said, wrote 10 plays, a play for each decade of the 20th century. Um, but I heard somewhere a long time ago the saying that nothing comes from nowhere. And so, how did this man write? First of all, which is very difficult. I think Eugene O'Neill tried to write the template, a cycle, a transgenerational cycle, and didn't work out. But he was born in Pittsburgh. He grew up as August Kittle because his father was white and his mother was African American. He didn't change his name to August Wilson until he was 20. Uh, Went around to a number of schools. Was a student who was truculent, and then he wrote a paper on Napoleon, and the teacher accused him of plagiarism. So he went to the Carnegie Library in Pittsburgh, and he went there so much every day instead of just saying I'm quitting school. They gave him a high school diploma from the library, which I've never heard of before. But he wrote, of course, the 10-play cycle. He wrote a couple of plays before. He actually wrote a musical western called Black Bart and the Seven Hills as part of his journey. But I say that to say you've got to understand, how do you get to language? And Denise talks about it. The language is so very important
Mhm.
because he has been compared to Shakespeare. I always say Shakespeare is just the British August Wilson, but he takes language that when you first read the play can be difficult, or you first begin reading his play, difficult to understand what he's saying because he learned how to write. He didn't go to writing school. He would go to bars in the Hill District of Pittsburgh, and he would actually listen to people, and that's how he writes. So his language sounds good, but but you've got to say it with a realism, with a naturalism. It
Right.
cannot be a caricature acting. So, and the details important. So, Denise, what did you think were some of the detail aspects in your role as director to making the play real and making it seem authentic?
So the realism is really big for me. I draw. I am a lover of plays that are written with common vernacular. I just like that a little bit more. Maybe that's closest to my life. I don't know, but I appreciated the fact that he just, in his writing, he just seems to keep it real.
Right.
His stories were not um, unknown to people in the African American community. They, in the play, they spoke like our ancestors spoke. They spoke like
Hmm.
our aunties and our uncles and our cousins spoke. And that to me was a really great point. Not everyone can do that. Some playwrights begin to write and they fail to write like
Yeah.
they write not in a way that they actually speak. And so August Wilson was able to do that. He wrote the dialogue in the way that you actually say it. you know
Yeah.
and so I,
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. He didn't make the lines too proper in their English execution. He just gave it to you real. So also the monologues, which were poetic and abstract in nature, I believe. um,
Hmm.
those it's subjective to the hearer. Some people say they worked,
Right.
some people say they didn't, some people say they were fine, and others were like they were way too long. But it's been accepted as great work, and so it worked in this particular play. I think all of his plays have lengthy monologues, but Headley, the part James played, had a series of very, very long, very profound,
Very, very,
very profound
very long monologues. Yes.
yeah.
You know.
But it's been accepted. I don't know that I could say, yeah, that worked. I'm a playwright, so any playwright that reads it could say, okay, I wouldn't put that line in, or I put that in there, I'd cut this and that and the other. But it's a done deal. It's not something we can go back and dispute. But it showed the heart and the mind of the playwright and the depths of his thought process. the poetry that he was able to tap into, the way he spun the words, and again the realness of how he delivered those things. So that, if anything else, that made those monologues work. Not just
Yeah.
Headley's, all of them.
And for me, one of the things that I've always felt about August Wilson is that he's an American writer. All right, and there have been some people who have said, for example, that his plays only focus in on the African American experience. And I always taken disagreement in the same way that, for example, Eugene O'Neill or Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, it spoke to a basic humanity. And I think August Wilson's plays are one and the same. You take a look at why does Shakespeare's plays still resonate today, because they were real. And I think Denise hit on a very good point. They touch on some very basic things. And his plays, as she said, can be abstract, they can be very real. But you think about Denise Seven Guitars, everything took place in one backyard. But
Mhm.
we got an entire world created in one backyard. And that was always the thing, that he could take the experience. And again, and these were not, Shakespeare wrote plays about King Lear and Titus Adirondackus, and he wrote plays about gentry people. August Wilson, who worked as a short order cook, as a porter, as a custodian, he took these basic men and women but created grand scales. So I think in terms of even keeping it's specific, yeah, you've got to remain true, because everybody has seen some of August Wilson work. So they'll tell you, that's not really how that line went, or that's not how that monologue went. And trust me, I heard that a few times on certain things. So people are very dogmatic about their August Wilson.
Yeah.
But the approach, I mean, that we had to use, for example, he writes very much to details. And I'll let Denise tell this story. So there is a scene in which my character gets tired of people complaining about a rooster. So he goes and does something to the rooster. And what he does is very visceral and raw. He actually cuts the neck off of the rooster. But now, how do you do that so it doesn't look like?
One,
Just talk about that, Denise.
yeah.
How did we finally get to that? Because we got to it on opening night, believe it or not, when we finally got the final solutions. I'll let you talk about that.
Well, I had not seen the play before. We didn't want it to look corny. We can't get
Right.
down like that. It had to
Right.
come across great, but it was a work in progress. I believe when you're walking in your destiny, things come alongside you to help you make it happen. And one of the things that opened up for me was that I was at a thrift store looking for odds and ends, and I found this rubber chicken. So it
Hmm.
just was crazy. They don't, it was just this one little lonely rubber chicken in a little, so I got it. So we took that thing through so much hair and makeup.
Pretty
we
much.
we stuffed it and put feathers on it, and we that was our baby. We should have named that rooster, but we
Yeah.
figured out a way through the beauty of props, and we took a cotton ball and stuffed it and put blood in it, and
Well,
James.
not blood. Not blood. We did kill no animals in the making of this play. So we put corn syrup and food dye.
That's it. We got it. So, but he did not. He was the writer. He didn't care about how we gonna make it work. He just was going and flowing into the story and trusting that the theater was going to be able to bring that to life. And so, that's another sign of a really good playwright. It wasn't impossible to do, but it fell within the flow of the actual story, and it supported the character of Headley. It supported that
Right.
Headley is not quite right. Up until that point, Headley was just doing a lot of talking and killing of chickens on the side, but he didn't make a big grandstand thing of it.
Yeah.
So I think that was one of the scenes that was memorable for that play. It made it work. It had great shock
Yeah.
value. The
Yes.
scenes Headley, all of the scenes Headley had great shock value, but that was one that was very shocking. And so
Right.
it was a, it was a family theater, so we couldn't go too extreme, but we were able to pull it off and, not gross anybody out too much. But yeah, it went through a lot of levels before we got into stage.
We got it done. And for those of you all, per chance, who may not have ever seen Seven Guitars, it takes place in the 40s. It's right after World War II. So African Americans are they're experiencing a lot of different things. Uh, a lot of characters in his play, even though it takes place in Pittsburgh, they're all basically country people. They all come from Alabama, Mississippi, and they're part of the Great Migration. And now all of a sudden the world is changing. We've defeated the Nazis and yada yada yada, and everybody is changing. Just like suburbia is coming to America. Well, the changes in African Americans. So the lead character Floyd was a blues musician
Hmm.
who left a woman behind, Vera. And he comes back, tries to, make his way back to Vera. And they live in the Hill District, which is an actual location right outside Pittsburgh,
Hmm.
where there are hills, very big hills, and houses. It's basically where at one time the immigrants from the Irish and Italians and Polish and Germans stayed there, and as they moved out, as always happens, it was inhabited by primarily African Americans. All his plays are set there. So anyway, the backyard, there's a rooming house. There's Headley, whose job is to he sells chickens. He picks scrap. He makes things. And then there are various friends of the musicians who stop by, and then a young lady who is a cousin of one, or niece of one of the ladies who stays at the at the boarding house. So the story takes place. It starts off at a funeral. So it's prologue, and then you go to flashbacks. This is what happened. This
Hmm.
is how we got to the end of the story. I don't want to give it away because it's part mystery, figuring out who did the killing.
Okay.
But he writes very specifically. For example, I remember Denise had to go out and find labels for the beer because he literally mentions the beer that he has in Pittsburgh. So you couldn't have a Budweiser label because that wasn't what they were drinking in Pittsburgh. So I
Yeah,
mean, go
that
ahead.
that's that's another thing. I want to speak to the research and the attention to detail that his writing
All right.
had. So if you're writing a play and you don't want someone to take your play and embellish it in a way that you did not have in mind, you have to input or impregnate your play in a way that those lines support or require that you follow through with your prop. So he had great attention to detail. You could tell he had done a lot of historical research, and that's another thing that made it work. It made it as authentic and real that you could tell. He had references to things that were going on in 1948, um, and he stayed true to that the whole time. So I think he might have had a lot of time to dedicate to playing, to writing the play, which all of us may not have as much now, but that is something that is striking within his plays. He has a lot of attention to detail, and you could tell he has done research. And you can go back. I think the cast had a ball going back and
Yeah.
research whether or not this was factual or actual, and we found out a lot of really great things. But that is another thing that makes that play work. That he hones in on this, that, and the other, and so much so that when you start fact checking, you'll see this was factual and this was something that he just kind of made up. It worked well, but
Right.
this wasn't true and accurate facts. But you don't
and
care
and
because you're in it. All that you're in it by then.
by then, and Denise got a lot of free research by giving away M&Ms. Trust me, whoever came back with the answer would get these huge M&Ms. So trust me, people will come back. Yeah, in this year, this beer was made. It was on this street, and then she was okay. Well, you were really the more okay. But anyway, the level of attention to detail is astonishing. And another thing is the rehearsal process and how you have to craft, because August Wilson was a poet. And I remember reading he was at the Yale School of Drama. I forget which play it was. But the first time they did a reading, and this was a play that would go on to win a Tony Award for Best Play. First thing it said was, that is too long to produce. So he cut it down. And even now the play is like 3 hours. Those are long plays. But as an actor, you love August Wilson because it's like jazz. I mean, the language is always prominent. But there's a price to be paid because you've got these monologues which sometimes are circular. I did this, and when doing this happened, but I did it, and it go, and people have done August Wilson will tell, but I know pacing for me as an actor, you've got to find a way to say this like people talk. You cannot get up there and like strike a pose, and do all that. You have got to get this stuff out, or else you'll be there until tomorrow. So one of the things that Denise always kept harping, no matter what notes, is like pace, 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 pace. So well, talk about that a little bit, Denise, and making sure we pace this.
There is a rhythm that is required to master August Wilson plays. It's a rhythm and it's a cadence, and you can do it or you can't. And even with the best actors, we had awesome actors. We had actors that gave it 100% every single night. And I have to stop and say thank you to you guys, to James, because it was not an easy thing to do. I'm not an actor. I wouldn't even know about that life, but I do know that it required a level of excellence that maybe most people are not used to. And it is because if your pacing is not strong, it throws off the time. And even with all of our efforts, that play was over. It was about 2.5 hours long. So with intermission, it was 2:45 running time. So, but it did not feel long. I don't think anybody ever said, God, it was such a long play, because of how he had the ebb and flow. It was up and down. There was a lot of action. There was music. There was singing. It was discovery. And that is another aspect that makes the play work. You've got to be able to have a good measure of all of that throughout the play. Another thing I wanted to talk about was character development. And so many times now we'll see plays that have characters. They'll have, like, let's say for instance, 7 characters, and 4 of them will have major lines, or 4 of them will have major stories, and the other 3 are just kind of, you don't really connect with them. They have lines, but it's not anything that is profound. His play was able to give every character a strong story, a strong identity. So that is another thing that made that play work. Every character is beloved. Every character, any audience member can say, okay, this character, she was this and that, the other. The part I liked about her, and the part I liked about him, and I remember, that's lacking a lot of times in some of the plays that I've seen, that the characters are not, they're not strongly developed. It's not about giving them a ton of lines. It's about making the lines that they have work, making the lines that they have profound and well written. And that's how you develop the character. So that I appreciate a lot.
Yeah. And on the note, I remember I was lucky. My first August Wilson play I did in Houston was Piano Lessons, when the ensemble did it. This was way back in 1990. Anyway, I was directed by somebody who August Wilson actually started off with, Claude Purdy, and I was very fortunate to get it. And I remember, like, the second or third day, because we're reading through the lines. Of course, you see certain lines, they're supposed to be comedic. But he stopped me and said, you know what, don't ever make fun of your character. So what that taught me is that, as Denise said, the characters, all of them have to be real, because you can't have an imbalance. And she did a great job of taking people of different experience levels, but making it all mesh together. But I know for Headley, because Headley sees visions, he goes off, but he goes and he has an apartment, he has a room, so he goes out, he sells things, he makes chicken sandwiches, he saves money. I mean, he is functional, even though at times And we've all met people like that. That he's a little off or something like that. So it's how do I make that character real and consistent? Because one of the things, if you're not real with August Wilson Line, it will self slap you with it. You will
Mhm.
know, or the audience will know this is not coming across. So for me, I know it was difficult to make the character work. That
Mhm.
I had to create some parts which were serious, some parts which were funny, some parts which are just saying a line. But I had to make them
Mhm.
all real, and I think that's a challenge for everybody. So Denise was saying she had to do that for all the characters, even those who came in with a few lines, is to find it. And then, for example, Denise, we have a scene at Headley scene at night when the young lady comes out to stop him. There's certain things that just again, I won't go into detail about it. It's a very raw, visceral scene that requires some action. Okay, it's basically a rape scene that turns around in a sense. It took a while for us because you gotta get a comfort level with the actors you're working with. Can I do this? Because you can't just, of course, it's a family theater. You can't just do it in the raw. But if you're just like barely touching, it's like, well, you were raving mad a minute ago. Now you're just genteelly touching this woman. So Denise was very good. So anything you want to say about that,
Well, I
Denise?
mean, we figured the play took those shocking scenes and tied them
Yeah,
in a nice bow.
right,
It flowed through the play. It wasn't like, okay, you just left it hanging. That was the beginning of a relationship that started between Ruby and Headley. And
right,
with the actors, every the actors had a lot of dialogue about why this and what was the motivation here and there. What do you think would have happened after the fact and all that. So I think I think the way it was presented and tied up at the end worked well. It set it up for his next play, uh,
right.
Headley.
King,
His
which actually was the only play that kind of like was in symmetry because we went from here to we went from Headley, I mean from Seven Guitars, which had Headley.
uh-huh.
We learn of his son to come, and I say son in quotes. If you haven't seen the play, or if you have seen it, I say it in quotes. You know what I mean. But then we have a continuation. But yeah, I mean, it was how basically what's comfortable. Is it comfortable if I kiss you? If it's comfortable and I touch you there? And all actresses are different.
Okay.
We had two actually,
That was
and one of them was like, well, why don't you just grab my butt right here, okay? Just get it over with. And the other one, and they both were excellent, but one, and I liked the approach in working with both of them, but in making it work, again, there's so many different dimensions, but I think that's important because that little detail is the one thing that will stand out to an audience, was it? Because that's an ugly scene. I mean, to get to, because it is rape. Even though August Wilson probably deals with it in a way I've never seen it dealt with. So it's actually heartwarming. Well, maybe not heartwarming. The action is not one of visceral discontent at the end of the scene. He manages to end it in a way that's, we got all kind of remarks when I would go off stage in the dark. But I mean, those are just some of the things that you have to be aware of in the August Wilson play.
yeah.
So I think we're coming up on, so uh closing remarks.
So
Okay, so for me, I'll just go. Go ahead. Go ahead, Denise.
I
I'll let
wanted
you.
to I wanted to talk about a couple of things that people might have found interesting. Definitely from our research. I don't know. It's not a big thing. It's not a thing that would take away from the beauty and the strength of the
Hmm.
play. But during our discovery and our research, we found that there were a couple of times that he did embellish some facts. Again, they did not take away from the layers, the beautiful layers of his play, but it would be good trivia information to know that one of the things we found out was about the fight, the Joe Louis fight with Khan, was
Hmm.
actually set in 1946, and the play was set in 1948. You remember that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
1948, and then there's songs throughout the play um, where for the most part, the verses were correct, but every now and then he would write his own verse, and so
Right.
you have to
Right.
listen to the whole song and realize that verse is not even in there, or this is,
Right.
he had to spin it in a way that he felt would make it work. I don't know if there was any rewrites or anything like that, but yeah, I found that really really interesting. So again,
Yeah.
let's take away from that. The play has marvelous layers. That's another thing that made it work. Marvelous, marvelous layers. And if you're worried about those details, then we didn't really
Yeah,
watch.
yeah, yeah. The actors have already failed, and they're gonna pick up on that. But
When you're thinking about
I
it,
think,
wait a minute, 1940.
yeah,
But that
yeah,
fight scene, the actors killed that fight scene. They were so present. It was one of the most beautifully acted scenes of the play, and people remarked about it and talked about how
yeah,
good
they
the
did.
actors were. So the play
Yeah,
gave actors an opportunity to do a serious piece that was not where everything was colored in the lines. It's a really great piece. So if you're an African American actor that gets a chance to do that piece, definitely do it. But you got to come with it.
yeah,
Can't be mediocre.
yeah. And I think just to end it from my part, it's a blessing every time I get to do, as I'm sure Denise will agree with. It just gets very exciting. It's very rare that you get to do a role that in which the words are just so beautiful. This is a thing of joy to say. It's a struggle. James Earl Jones, who did Fences and won a Tony, one of August Wilson's plays. I did Fences. I have the shirt on and the hat. But he said you could never end an August Wilson play because he creates a world so grand. How can you wrap it up into a nice little bow at the end? So there's always going to be, and we went back constantly on everything. How should we end it? How should this? But I think he is a great writer, period. I won't even say African American writer. He's a great American writer. He's a great writer in the tradition of the Greek tragedies. He just writes that. He takes the same stories. And on the last note, he even mentioned someone one time referred to his work as focusing in on Black America. And he said, well, would you ask David Mamet or, Terrence McNally, does their work represent only white America? No, they create stories that are set in a place and time. But we live in a country in which there are a lot of people, so there are a lot of different stories. So I think what he did was just to give us a glimpse into the richness of the life in which people may have marginalized or thought of as caricatures. He created Shakespearean level characters who were just everymen, and I think he gave dignity and humanity to all of them. So I'm going to shut up before we get another chat note saying that we're running over time. All right.
We still got a few more minutes, and this seems like a good time to go to questions. We got a couple from William Dool. First one for both of y'all.
Okay.
Which character means the most to you, and why?
For me, which character? Well, I would say, one thing I think about August Wilson characters, there are no small roles. I've had roles of various lengths in August Wilson plays because they're all written so. So in the play itself, though, Floyd, it's hard because all of the characters were so good that he wrote. Vera was good as a woman who this man basically left her, goes away to Chicago, ends up in jail, then wants to come back and be with her. And then we have Renee is gonna kill me. What was Renee's character's name? Do you remember?
Louise.
Yeah. So she's like not a spinster, but she has some amazing. And Renee, you crush that if you're listening right now. You crush those lines. There's one about a penny I ain't got. I can't remember the lines, but it was beautiful. But Floyd, to me, and I read somewhere, Floyd is a character who was a blues musician, left Vera, went to Chicago, ended up in jail, and now he just wants to get his piece of the pie. So in a way, somebody referred to him as like almost like a Malcolm X in terms of he was a change of thinking. not allowing what the old paradigms were to control your world, but the world's different, after World War II. So, but how do you make your way? So Floyd and Vonnie Vaughn did a fantastic job with that, of making that character go. So I would say, actually, Vera, who Caprice, did a wonderful job with that. But and then Floyd's character, but Headley just wore me out every day. I had to go home and take a nap after that. After Act Two with those 10-page monologues, so that's what I would say anyway.
So you would pick Floyd as your favorite?
Floyd, well, I wanted to do Canewell. That's right. I want to do Canewell. I think Floyd was the most interesting. Headley's character to me was part of that, the abstract in his plays, So he was. I mean, I love my character. I thank you so much for having the foresight to basically give me an offer I couldn't reject, which was, I give you the part if you agree to do it now. I was like, okay, and move on. But so and that's how she got. That's how I did the part, and I love it. But Floyd, I mean, it's apt. You're picking minute details. All of the characters. Ruby's character was great, and what she brought, and how she changed that rape scene around. Everybody was good. So I don't know. I'll let you, the director. So you have an impartial kind of thing. They're all your children out there. What do you think?
I do love the character of Floyd, and how he's going through. I was talking to Vaughn, and I was sharing with him, this character is living a life where dreams are deferred. He's living a life of struggle. He's living a life of poverty, desperation. Floyd was going through a lot, and he got to a point where he was desperate. Have you ever seen, if you've not seen a person who had so much to lose and just was at the wall, he had to make a decision.
Right.
And he had said, if I have to kill somebody, I'm going. So that was striking, to see him evolve, and at the end, meet a tragic end because of his quest. However, my favorite character was Canewell. Because
Canewell was
is the sweetheart, the male sweetheart of the play to me. He is the person who is your ride or die, your friend, your support system, somebody that is walking the path with you as far as he can go with you, and just selflessly putting himself in a place of helping his friend. He's liked by everybody, but Canewell was a friend to the end, and that's what I really loved about that particular character. So, I love them all. All of them have such depth. I can say wonderful things about every last one of them, and I think
it's true.
Is somebody that other people can resonate with. But I like the fact that Canewell was just a friend to him to the end.
Right. And don't you think his female characters were very strong and very rich? And I won't even get into why I asked that question, but I'm sure some people have said, but people always say something. But from a female perspective, African American female, how did you perceive the writing? Not even getting too much into the acting, which was all very good. How he wrote those characters? What do you think?
I think he tapped into what a woman would actually say and do under those circumstances. I don't think that any of them were one-dimensional. I think all of them, all of them had strong lives and strong positions in the men's life. I can't imagine seeing a play done without those women and the force of those women in that play. So, again, that goes back to character development and how important that is.
Right.
You don't have a character in there with just a couple lines to say. That's just dumb. You need to be a good writer where you just write them out, or you speak in reference to them. You don't write a character and don't develop that character. So he did a great job doing that.
Even though he has a character in one of his plays that his only line is "I want my ham," or something to that. And that's his only. But that's a rich character because imagine you got to say that throughout the play. You have to bring some nuance to that, or it becomes just annoying. But it's funny because people have often remarked on both sides of the aisle about his characters. That's why I wanted a woman's point of view from Denise. But he changed his name to August Wilson because his mother's maiden name was Wilson to honor her when he was 20. So that's actually, when people say anything about his regard for women, he named himself. He changed his name from Arthur Kittle, to August Kittle to August Wilson because of his respect for women and the strength his mother showed in raising 6 kids basically by herself in a very difficult place to raise them. So, all right. So we have another question, I guess.
We do have another question from William. If you had to pick one thing that you think makes this play work as well as it does, what would it be?
Ooh. See, both me and Denise said, ooh, on that one. Plays are dependent on the content, what you're working with. A director who can kind of weave all of these things into one quilt. Tech works. You need somebody who can create the lighting because it will take place in one backyard, but it will be day, night, morning, afternoon. So you've got to make that work. You've got to take actors who are committed to it because, to put on an August Wilson play that works means you got a lot of work and you got to really open yourself up and feel those characters. Because Denise, and I was so glad you started off on that, he kept it real. So if it ain't the words that's not real, it's just not being real. So you've got to find a way to summon up and not be one-dimensional because the characters are not written one-dimensional. You can't play them as that. So you can't be easy. You got to find places. Some places you got to push. Some places you got to know when to stop and let that moment resonate. So it takes everybody. It takes an audience, because actors will say what they want. When the audience responds, that additional energy. The audience, and you can't pick and choose pardon me, your audience, but I think they're all basic components. It's difficult to say because if you pull one of those things out, it's not gonna really work. It will work on some level, but not worthy of the language and the worlds in which he is created. So I'm gonna leave it at that.
So I think I think a compelling story is the ticket. That's the thing. A really strong, compelling story that has a strong beginning and pulls you in and takes you on a journey, and then has a good, strong ending. So the structure of the play, although it was a lengthy play, it was very long. I think the story in itself was probably the thing that really made it stand out the most. So,
Right.
the character development, we talked about structure and things like that, but I think the story was really wonderful. So I hope that's a good answer. I think I do think I do a lot of work with 10-minute plays, and people struggle with putting together a full body piece of work.
Right.
But Seven Guitars was full body the whole way through. So that is something that you've got to develop over time. You've got to make it work. But if I had to say one thing, it would be that. So a good story.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we've been going for about 45 minutes, so it is time for us to wrap it up. Thank y'all for joining us. Thank you, everyone in the comments, for watching. And be sure to join us again in 2 weeks on Monday, June 1st, when we're going to have Jennifer Decker on to discuss The Moors by Jen Silverman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank y'all, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Be safe, everybody.